we wanted to attract a younger event goer, somebody who would spend $1,500 going to Coachella on the weekend, but wouldn't spend $25 going to a play. And how could we activate that audience? Or audiences that maybe wouldn't choose to see theater at all, while of course still appealing to traditional theater audiences.
Hello, and welcome to Art Restart, where we learn from artists who, wherever they work, whatever they make, are shaking up the status quo in their fields and in their communities. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, a production of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with theater director and producer Graham Wetterhahn. Graham is the founding artistic director of After Hours, a Los Angeles theater company that specializes in producing what Graham calls immersive-enhanced productions. What is immersive-enhanced? Well, as an example, their inaugural show was a 2018 production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Now, of course, After Hours had licensed the script, so they contractually couldn't make any changes to the actual play. What they could do, however, is affect the audience's experience of the whole evening. When audiences arrived at the cavernous warehouse space, they were admitted to a fictional 1960s psychiatric hospital and cast as patients, free to explore hidden rooms and interact with characters for a full hour before the scripted performance even began. Each audience member got different colored wristbands that indicated to the production team the extent to which he or she wished to be an active participant. In other words, no audience member was made to feel uncomfortable. They were able to determine their own experience. The show was a big hit, and wonder of wonders, it actually brought in those unicorns that theater companies the country over are chasing. A genuinely young, energetic, and paying audience. Is this type of theater plus theme park adjacent experience the thing that will get audiences to put down their tablets and pay for an in-person play? Well, that's exactly what I wanted to find out from Graham. After Hours has gone on not only to produce a broad array of successful immersive-enhanced productions, but also to organize the Los Angeles Immersive Invitational, a collegial competition that brings together the city's most adventurous immersive storytellers under one roof, and gives them 48 hours to create a new 10-minute piece based on a single prompt. Now, having gotten a sense of what producing an average after-hours show entails, the amount of labor, design, planning, and experimentation that a straightforward production of a play would not require, I asked Graham if he could explain, well, is it really worth it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there was the onboarding experience, the hour-long pre-show, and then the 2.5-hour show itself.
Right.
So, the onboarding and the hour-long pre-show overlapped, of course. But why?
So you're designers that design not only the show, but the experience beforehand. You had to have staff to man both rooms. It is like a small amusement park.
Yeah, I think we had something like 30. The cast is 16, and I think we had an additional 10 to 15 working on any given night, including our bar team.
Yeah,
Yes.
So tell me about its success, because clearly, after all, you decided to do it again. So,
Well, yes. Oh, so let me explain why we did it first. In LA, I think probably maybe throughout the country, but I can only speak for Los Angeles. We were having this really weird trend. This was at the time of, I don't know if you remember the Museum of Ice Cream or comparable, what I call selfie palaces, basically museums of something that you can take pictures in. This Museum of Ice Cream was selling out for months. It was just 7 rooms where you could take pictures, and I think you got a scoop of ice cream at the end. And that was selling out months in advance for $50 a ticket. And there was all these amazing plays that couldn't sell tickets to save their life, or if they were having to extreme discount them for $10, $15.
For $10 to $15, right.
Which is, a totally unsustainable model. And not that 50 is that much more sustainable at this scale, but the point stands, it's better than 10 to 15. And I said, at the time, more traditional immersive experiences were starting to take off in LA at a smaller scale, and the going rate was $1 a minute. We weren't going to do that in a 4-hour experience, of course. But it was, hey, what if we can sort of, I don't want to say trick people into seeing a traditional theater piece, but sort of make it feel more like an event, make it feel more like a whole night out, not just I'm going to see a play, but I'm going to this cool thing, this cool happening. And so that was sort of the impetus for why we did all of the work. We wanted to attract a younger event goer, somebody who would spend $1,500 going to Coachella on the weekend, but wouldn't spend $25 going to a play. And how could we activate that audience or audiences that maybe wouldn't choose to see theater at all, while of course still appealing to traditional theater audiences.
So then I have to ask, did you clearly, you must have activated that audience.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, we had very good response. I saw the statistics that 60 or 70% of our audience was under 40, which is pretty spectacular for LA theater. Right. And we had really high audience satisfaction rating across all ages and demographics.
Did they tell their friends? Did the word of mouth get out?
Word of mouth on that show definitely got out. We extended 4 times, and we would have extended longer if the venue would have let us, but they were having issues from a venue level, so we had to close the show. But
and what was the ticket price?
The ticket price, we even had a couple of pay what you can nights. So the typical ticket price was about $75. That was, okay. I would have charged more today, but at the time that was our was $50 to $75, depending on if you were an acute patient or a chronic patient. And that included no drinks or anything like that, which is different than a different model that we're working with now that does sometimes include drinks, which we can talk about later.
And so did that production pay for itself?
The terrible theater question. That production did not quite pay for itself, but if we were able to continue it running, it would have paid for itself. We essentially came within spitting distance of breaking even. But, once again, we're able to support 30 plus artists in the process, not to mention all of the designers. We still work with that piece. For example, we're doing, I don't know if I can officially announce this, but we are consulting with several theaters throughout the country who are looking to put up similar productions of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I think as a calling card for us, and we still own all of our pre-show, all of the original IP that we created for it, that in the long run, definitely it will pay for itself. I know you probably want to hear, we made money hand over fist, but it's still theater.
Right. No, but you're bringing me to my next question, which is you're creating kind of a new type of business. I mean, you're talking about IP here. Even though you paid for the rights to put on the play, you are selling the experience. And I also noticed that After Hours, I don't think, is a nonprofit.
Very good eye, that is true. We are not a nonprofit, and that is extremely unusual for Los Angeles in particular.
Right. So tell me about creating in Los Angeles a theater company that is not a nonprofit and is starting to do the kind of work that you just mentioned, which is consulting with other theater companies.
I think when we started, the decision to not be a nonprofit was simply we were too small. I wasn't specifically mission driven in the way that I think a lot of nonprofits are. Mostly we were just too young. I started producing plays when I was 24, but in traditional proscenium musicals. And, as we quickly started scaling up and then moving into immersive, obviously we had conversations about should we become a nonprofit? It's easier to take donations instead of going through a fiscal sponsor. And I think we realized it would limit we wanted to stay really flexible because the way most companies in LA in the immersive scene are able to make money is to use their skills for a marketing activation. So the studios, the film and TV studios or brands would then hire theater companies or agencies or whoever to build immersive worlds. I think maybe you've heard of, there was a very famous activation at South by Southwest, 8 years ago, where they built the entire set of Westworld and had the audiences, living in Westworld for a few hours. Oh. And so that's a big version of it. But, for example, we did one through an agency for an HBO show where it's HBO's, or I guess it was Cinemax, but owned by HBO, called Warrior. And for the premiere of that show, we were hired to they rented out the oldest bar in Chinatown. It was a 2-story bar, and we had 20 bilingual Mandarin and Cantonese and English speaking actors. And we did a full 1890s gangster brothel kind of hangout thing. And then that culminated in a stunt show, which the actual stunt coordinators on the TV show did, that went through both floors. And it was just this really, really cool experience. But that was the kind of stuff that if we were a nonprofit, we wouldn't be able to take that kind of work. But here we were able to get hired by the agency to use our theater and immersive theater skills and help build that world.
So since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and as you're planning your next production, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, what were the top 2 or 3 lessons learned? What have you implemented now in your producing model that you learned through your first production?
Definitely always trying to design for all audience, trying to make sure that we're providing a satisfactory and it's not just an excellent experience for all types of audience, whether they really want to engage or whether they don't.
Do you take into account accessibility for people with disabilities?
As much as is physically possible in LA, we have a really horrible, yes, of course, we do sign language interpreted shows. Pretty much everything we do is wheelchair accessible, when the space physically allows for it. We're currently working on a project that has an actor in a wheelchair. And we were pretty shocked and horrified when we realized that while there are a number of spaces that are wheelchair accessible for audience, there are 0 that are accessible for actors and performers. The backstages aren't accessible. Maybe there's 1 or 2, but they're very expensive and not available to rent. So it's a huge systemic issue we have in Los Angeles that I was unaware of until we started this search. And I suspect is a problem in a lot of places. Another lesson we learned is how a show that has so many different layers to it, the onboarding, the pre-show, the show itself, sort of breaks traditional theatrical organizational infrastructure. The director in particular, I think the role of the director, because you sort of ultimately have, I think there's a couple different types of the directors. There's what I like to call the classical musicians versus the jazz musicians. So there's directors that are really good at, I have 12 days. I'm going to come in with my book of all of my blocking done before I walk into the room and just execute. Whereas in this kind of show, a lot of it is almost devised. You're really figuring out how the show moves throughout the rehearsal process. It requires a lot of trial and error. It requires a lot of flexibility, and things are going to get added and subtracted as we find whether it works or not. Even, in previews, a lot of the times previews are looked at in traditional theater times to sort of lock in tech and try a couple of things. In immersive, we're literally still building the show because the audience's interaction with what you've built is part of the show. So for Cuckoo's Nest, from week 1 to week 2 of previews, our entire pre-show changed. And how we were moving the audience within the show changed based on what we learned. So you have to sort of have that enthusiasm for experimentation and that stomach for changing and reacting to what everyone else is doing.
Have you considered commissioning someone to create a brand new piece from the ground up?
Not only have I considered it, we've done it.
Oh.
This last year, we got a lab space that we've been working out of, much smaller in North Hollywood. And we've been doing what I call the Dark Library series. We've been taking, in this particular case, authors. So the first iteration, we just did an Edgar Allan Poe experience. This most recently, which I think is most my aesthetic, is we did what was called Dark Library Paris 1925. And the audience was invited to a salon of Gertrude Stein's house and to interact with the Fitzgeralds, Ernest Hemingway, Josephine Baker, a few characters that were sort of loosely based on people of the time, but were sort of unique characters. That was a 75-minute cocktail experience where the first 15, 20 minutes was open world. And then we had sort of an hour-long scripted show that had abstract dance numbers, musical numbers, scene work. And the show comes with 4 cocktails served to you throughout the show. Not full-size cocktails, but, 2/3, 3/4 size cocktails.
And what was the price point on that? What was the ticket?
Yeah, so that we found, first of all, we're a little bit farther along, but that price point was $75 to $125. We had an upgraded drink service, and which came with sort of the best seats and a couple of custom character interactions. And then the more general ticket just came with the basic cocktails, with not upgraded spirits, etc., which honestly were still really good. We also serve them in glassware and stuff for the VIP tickets. But yeah, 75 and 125, and we're able to run that twice a night. The audience size for that show is about 30, but it's a much lower overhead show. And those shows are the ones you've been able to have financial success on. So we're working on a whole series of these right now.
And why is it just you don't have to pay for the licensing? What makes them more successful?
No, it's not really the licensing costs. I mean, I think it's also the size of the space. We're working in 1,000 square foot space versus a 7,000 square foot space. We are paying for, I'm paying for, depending on the show, anywhere from 6 to 10 people per night versus 30 people per night. Our percentage of, when you're doing a show like Cuckoo's Nest, 100 seat plus show, some nights are going to be sold out. Some nights are going to be, half sold. That's just the nature of the game, unfortunately. But here, because of the size of the space, it's pretty easy to stay consistently full. So we're able to sort of maximize revenue. And then if we have a night that's not selling, I can very easily cut it and move everybody to another night. So the overhead's lower, the run costs are much lower, and our ticket price is able to be higher. And it still feels like a complete, 4 hours is kind of a marathon. Like that's a lot for a lot of people. Right. The 75 minutes really feels good when you're doing it. A lot of people would spend, for 4 drinks, would spend $60 to $80 at a Los Angeles bar anyway. So the fact that you're getting that plus a show is kind of nice.
Is this your full-time job now?
Yeah, it is my full-time job. I should say that I come from an insurance family. So I started the theater company. We have a family insurance agency. And so after I graduated from UCLA, I immediately went to work in the family insurance agency. And I only interacted with my grandma and grandpa, my aunt, and my father.
There's a joke in there about the heir of an insurance family going into theater, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, there certainly is. And my sister did too, for whatever it's worth. She lives in New York as an actress. I'm not an actor, and I never wanted to be.
So you had the day job when you started out?
I had the day job when I started out, and I started producing because I just wasn't, working in the bottom floor of my grandparents' house, which they had converted into an office. It was actually quite nice, but I was, 23, 24 years old. I wasn't getting to meet a whole lot of people. So my friends and I, we did theater in college. I was not a theater major in college, but we had a good student-run theater company at UCLA that I was very involved in. And we sort of said, hey, let's start putting together shows after work, thus the after hours. And
no, I asked because it's pretty amazing that you're able to support yourself through this venture. That's rare in the theater world, right?
Some months are better than others. So some months I'm glad to have the opportunity to help back, to jump back. The nice thing is if I'm not, then I can go pick up some hours in the insurance agency. And I haven't needed to do that very often, maybe a little bit more during the pandemic. But yes, I'm very lucky. I have this safety net, and I don't make I have no false pretenses that I could totally do this without the help of my family.
I want to be sure that we talk about the Invitational.
Sure.
How many have you had up to now? You just completed one, right?
Yeah, the most recently completed one makes for our 5th Invitational. 4 of those were in Los Angeles. One of those was in Denver. Next year, we will be having one in New York as well as Los Angeles, and maybe 1 or 2 other cities, which we're talking to. But the New York one and the LA one are definite.
What made you want to, you didn't have enough to do. What made you want to start this?
Yeah, so the start of it is actually a pretty fun story. When we did our last 5 years production, which was what we call the multi-sensory experience, it involved a scent score and cocktail pairing. That was our first time playing with cocktail pairings in that way.
So the musical the last 5 years.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We had 2, relatively well-known TV film actors who were both working quite regularly, and we were on our second. I had a guess sort of ahead of time how long it was going to be able to run, and I almost got it right. And then both of our 2 leads got booked on TV. We had understudies, and it was fine when one of them was off and the other one was on. But we had a situation where both of them were off. Both of them had a
classic LA's theater story.
Very LA problem, yeah. And so we were like, okay, we can't really sustain the show for another 3 weeks with just our understudies, who are excellent, but the ticket sales are for the lead actors. And so we said, okay, well, we have the space for another 2 weeks. What can we do with the space? And I knew this, unfortunately I had about a month notice, so it wasn't like we were doing this in a week. And I said, well, what if we do what can we do in a week? We can't do a full production, but maybe we can do sort of like 48-hour film festival kind of thing. And so I reached out to a gentleman named Noah Nelson, who runs a publication called No Proscenium, which is sort of the premier immersive theater publication, at least in Los Angeles and New York. And they have something called the Immersive Experience Institute, which is sort of their like nonprofit advocacy branch. And she was interested in helping me sort of build it up. And so we both collectively invited some teams. The first year we just had 4 teams participating in the little theater space that we had. We subdivided our main playing space in 2. We had another group in the dressing rooms, and then we had a 4th group in a small 20-seat black box that was attached to our larger space that we rented for the weekend. And that's how it started. But out of those 4 pieces, 3 of them became full-length pieces, and 1 of them toured. So we had
that's incredible.
Really high percentage of success with that first festival. And also there was a couple of the teams that collaborated and created a totally original work unrelated to the festival piece. So we were both really, really encouraged by that response. And there just wasn't anything like it. I mean, this is true for theater as well as immersive theater. It's really hard to find community. When I was a 24, 25-year-old producer starting out, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have peers that I knew how to reach out to. I was just sort of an island. And that's unfortunately a pretty common story. And so I think the Invitational has really done a lot to allow immersive companies to get together, at least once a year, because whether you're participating or just an audience member, it still becomes sort of a lovely weekend, and allow people to share styles, a lot of artists will find new collaborators and just have a moment to check in and talk and learn from each other, which I think is really, really valuable idea exchange, particularly in these mediums that are so diverse, like immersive theater, because you have companies that are dance-based companies. You have companies that are more game and puzzle forward companies.
Right.
You have companies that are theater, improv, comedy focused companies. You have some that are more tech focused. And so bringing all of these different types of disciplines under one roof is really, really exciting.
And lastly, looking out at your creative schedule over the next 12 months, what are you particularly excited about?
Sure. A couple of different things. So there's the Dark Library series that we're working on, of course. So the next production, we're going to be doing a more expanded remount of our Dark Library Poe. We have a few more of those in the works, things like Jane Austen, H.G. Wells. And so that series we've been building out and will hopefully then be able to tour and license. I'm working on 4 or 5 different plays and musicals that are all original development that could play off-Broadway or on Broadway, and hopefully will incorporate certain immersive or non-traditional elements. I'm not going to say, I should have said this.
These are all full-length pieces.
Full-length pieces, yeah.
Okay.
I believe that immersive is a design category, not a genre.
Oh.
Or I should say it is not just a genre, it is also a design category, so that any production is capable of incorporating immersive or non-traditional element, or just a way to make the experience more engaging for an audience member. In the Dark Library series, we talk about the combination of theater and hospitality. And so, I don't necessarily say I'm doing this immersive play. I say I'm doing this play, and I treat immersive like any design category.
Graham told me that he once participated in a public panel, after which the organizer of the festival announced in public that after-hours model of theater making would mark the end of theater. So it's safe to say that some folks don't like this model at all. But that's why I really appreciate what Graham said at the end of the interview. Immersive is merely a design choice. It's an interesting option for any director to keep in her toolbox to use when it feels particularly warranted or valuable. Theater is not going to be destroyed here. If you'd like to read a longer version of this interview, in which you can hear Graham talk about that hair-raising panel I just mentioned, just head to uncsa.edu/artrestart. Be sure to subscribe or follow us so you can be the first to hear a change-making artist's words of wisdom. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, thank you for listening.